Hey guys, Tohstee here. Just wanted to make a quick video about my Lightning Conduit starter for the Lake of Kalandra expansion for Path of Exile. Had a lot of fun with it. Knew it was a little bit of a risky start given the new skill and no one really knew how to make it work. But I think it ended up having a lot of damage for not too much investment early on. Helped me kind of get off the ground, especially with some of the loot nerfs that I know we were all aware of near the beginning. And yeah, it helped me transition into a Doryani's, which is now doing about 17 million DPS with about 90,000 effective hit. So overall, pretty happy with where it's at. Experimented with a few different types of setups that I just want to kind of cover here today. This is going to be definitely more of a build review guide rather than a straight guide itself. Isn't going to have any leveling trees or anything like that. If you're looking for leveling, I would definitely recommend Ziz's guide or DS Lily's guide. They were all pretty helpful in pulling this together. So the biggest issue that I want to call out first before you're thinking about Lightning Conduit is just the 2-button playstyle. Before you are able to actually do the Lightning Conduit cast, you will need to shock the enemy, since it is only able to really attack shocked enemies. And so that requires you to usually apply it via either Hydrosphere, or Stormbrand, or Orb of Storms. I think that was primarily what people were investigating kind of near the start of the patch. And just wanted to tested all of them out all pretty thoroughly myself. And I think at the beginning of the league, before I ended up switching to Doryani's prototype, Stormbrand 100% worked the best, and I would definitely recommend that if you're looking to give this a go. Hydrosphere, it only applied shock on the first hit, so if you didn't kill the enemy in one hit, then you would have to move Hydrosphere off of the enemy and then move it back on to them to reapply the shock. And it was just way too many button presses. The area of it is definitely very nice, but with some of the Archnem rares having a lot of hit points, definitely became an issue pretty quick. Orb of Storms is also very nice. The only issue with that is that you have to be in melee range because it drops right underneath you, and so that often led to me getting smacked a few times, having to just try to be in melee range with a bunch of these rares. So that really became an issue up until I ended up swapping to Doryani's, and then it was beneficial for me to be closer to the enemy because of just how prototype works. So yeah, Stormbrand was very nice. It allows you to keep consistent shocks on the enemy, jumps around quite a whole bunch. You could look into taking the brand nodes over here to increase the cast speed and also put another one onto an enemy if you'd like. Reminder, a few people experimented with that. I didn't give it a try. I think Stormbrand worked out just fine by itself without these. But definitely, if you're looking to start Lightning Conduit, give Stormbrand a go and see how that goes. The main call out with Stormbrand is just the cast timing of Lightning Conduit compared to the activation frequency of Stormbrand. As you can see here, it has a cast time of 0.5 seconds, and Stormbrand should have something very similar here. Yep, 0.75 seconds, but it activates every 0.5 seconds while attached. So if you have no cast speed on the tree, it should line up perfectly so that by the time you clear the shock off of Lightning Conduit, Stormbrand then activates at the same exact time to reapply the shock, and there should be no overlap. The issue with this is if you are spamming Lightning Conduit on like the map boss, for example, and the timing due to any additional cast speed, the timing of the Lightning Conduit going off versus the shock applying to the enemy via Lightning Conduit can get in a pretty mismatched state, and you'll end up whiffing quite a few casts of Lightning Conduit, which really hurts your DPS and really just feels pretty shitty too. So just be mindful of that. If you feel like sometimes your Lightning Conduits aren't going off, could be because of your cast speed. After I got a good day one start, got to maps, got through the campaign, I ended up switching to self chill. By that point, all my gear was just all very basic day one gear, life and all res. You want to try to get a +1 skill gems weapon if possible. But also for self chill, what you'll want to do is get a one that has the veiled modifier on it that triggers a socketed spell, preferably one that is directly with the unveil and not with the craft, because that will differentiate between the 4-second cooldown and an 8-second cooldown. For those who might not know, self chill basically uses 2 rings. One is the winter weave, which reverses the effect of the chill on you, and then the second one is the one that came out, I think, last league, that Ben had created, called Call of the Void. And what this basically does is allows all hits to be able to chill. So when you do that, this is a pretty standard ascendancy setup over here. But if you do go self-chill, you can take Shaper of Winter out, since you'll already have the guaranteed hits can chill from Call of the Void, and spec into Bastion of Elements, which is a nice little bit of tankiness if you're having some issues there. Definitely Elementalist, one of the more squishy classes, so that was a much appreciated swap, at least for me. But anyways, so swap to that on day 2 or day 3 was pretty nice. Winterweave is the 1 or 2 chaos item, definitely very cheap. And Call of the Void, I think, was starting out maybe around a div, going down to around 80 chaos, and then I was able to scoop it up for 50 chaos, I think. So not too bad. A pretty cheap ring, given the effects that it gives you. It will basically give you 30% reversed effect of chill. So really helps to, I think, bridge the gap between starting to climb into some of those higher tier maps. Increase your DPS just a little bit. The move speed is very nice, and allows you to basically farm up some currency to eventually swap to prototype. The main thing that you'll want to watch out for when you do swap to self-chill is making sure that you put Forbidden Right one to the trick weapon, obviously. But what Forbidden Right does is hurt yourself as just part of the skill effect through chaos damage. And so the issue that I was having is that you don't really have a whole lot of chaos res on day 2 or day 3. Or at least I definitely don't. The gear's a little bit expensive at that time, and you're still just trying to farm up some currency. So it can really hurt for this to be kind of consistently proccing onto you. So you want to make sure that you try to get up to 75% chaos res as quickly as possible. Some people were saying, 50%, 60% on the PoE builds subreddit is the sweet spot, and I seemed to be getting the max shield just fine with 75%, and it felt much nicer too. I wasn't as anywhere near in danger when I had max chaos res. So if you do have troubles capping out on chaos res, this is at least roughly the tree of kind of my day 2, day 3 setup. Just some things to call out from, I think, the tree that Ziz put out. You go over here to get the chaos nodes. It helps you to just kind of cap it out just a little bit. Really puts you up to that cap to help negate some of the Forbidden Right damage. I also ended up picking up Ghost Dance to try to recover some of my energy shield. Since you have Eldritch Battery, sometimes with a 6-link, the Lightning Conduit can really eat through some of your mana or your energy shield very quickly. So Ghost Dance helps to kind of keep that topped up. I don't really know if it's needed, but since I was running Divine Blessing for an aura, it really helps to smooth it out. So if you have an extra point, consider picking that up too. And then I also try to go into Glancing Blows over here too, picking up the Sanctuary wheel here. Didn't really get me fully maxed out on block. Did help a little bit while I was just trying to build up some of my gear, but that only required level 94, and you can definitely make some improvements into this tree too. Like, for example, spell suppression, I think with the nerfs this week has been very hard to get. So I ended up taking this out for, unfortunately, 0% spell suppression. We still have quite a bit of EHP with that taken out, but it was just frankly too hard for me to get onto my gloves, helmet, and boots with the nerfs. So ended up taking that wheel out of there compared to some of the other builds or the other trees going out. So that was quite a bit of DPS on day 2, day 3. I think I was hovering around maybe 2 to 3 million. Felt pretty good. It was a very smooth week start, but at least for what we're hopefully all here for, on to the Doryani setup. Some of the thoughts I had with this, obviously we'll want to try to pick up a cluster. Some pretty okay nodes, definitely not something that I think is required, but it helps Doryani's lesson for the leech, and then the overshock to really help make sure that you can get the full 65% shock for the max lightning conduit damage. Really helped to kind of reduce some of the stress on the gear in the tree otherwise. Some other really good pickups that you can end up putting into this these jewel slots, Grand Spectrums with the buffs that they got this patch, or at least rather the new effects that they got. Some pretty crazy benefits from this. So I have right now 2 increased elemental damage Grand Spectrums and 1 minimum frenzy Grand Spectrum. This is definitely the one that I think is the most quality of life, just with the cast speed and the move speed they get from it, but not required. If you're just mapping, you'll be able to get full frenzy charges from the cold snap, but I wanted it for just when you're doing bossing, since you obviously usually don't have too much to kill while you're bossing. So those were definitely a nice pickup. The elemental Grand Spectrums were about 1 div each, and then the frenzy one was unfortunately about like 10 divinations, or divine orbs, sorry. Aside from that, obviously you'll want to get a Doryani's prototype. This I picked up for, I think, 5 div, and they are currently fluctuating a little bit between 5 to 6 div. Hopefully not too bad to try to farm. I think manageable for quite a few people, but the main issue here is I think you'll want to make sure that you have a way to get the negative lightning resistance. Here in 3.19, we have thankfully the ability to farm the rings from the lake, which gives us a huge amount of negative resistance, pretty good for enabling the Doryani's prototype. But unfortunately, these mechanics are kind of few and far between. I think the last one was in Scourge League, where we got a lot of negative resistance made available to us too. But otherwise, it's going to be really hard to kind of reach the negative 200% cap to really maximize your damage. So for future leagues, just be mindful if you're looking at this kind of build now, it could be much harder to get those negative rings in the future. Other than that, I have a Crest of Desire, which I think has really helped with some of the energy shield pressure. Since your Lightning Conduit, I have a +8, +49% quality one, which I happened to just pick up, didn't even buy, it was just doing heist, and got a very lucky roll there. So right now I have a level 30 Lightning Conduit, which feels pretty great. That has really helped to reduce some of the pressure on the energy shield. Really just allows all your mana to be used for Divine Blessing, which has really helped quite a bit. I was looking into using maybe Frost Shield in my cast 1 damage taken setup, and then taking up Divine Shield to see if that helped. But frankly, I think the Frost Shield just did not enough benefit to really warrant the mana drain that it was kind of putting onto me. So ended up taking that out of the setup and putting it in with Purifying Flame, but we'll go over the gems here in a little bit. Other than that, I don't think there's really too much else to call out on the tree or the items. Hopefully a pretty standard setup here. Just be mindful of any of the nodes that are giving you elemental resistance. Could make it just a little bit harder to meet that negative 200% threshold for your prototype. But otherwise, I think it is a pretty standard tree for the rest of it. And again, still no spell suppression on the gear. which is a little unfortunate, but we still have quite a sizable amount of EHP from trying to get a lot of armor and evasion. We do run Grace and Determination in this. So finally, just going down the gems one by one, we have a few different setups here. So as mentioned, our auras that we'll be kind of consistently running are just the typical required auras, unfortunately. Determination, Defiance Banner, Grace, and Tempest Shield, which makes us immune to shock. Helps quite a bit with how often things do reflect shock, and since we're inflicting max shock, could be quite dangerous. Really have enjoyed this pickup, even if we're not trying to really max out on our block. It still feels pretty good to have. Shield Charge, just to get around the map a little bit quicker, linked with a faster attacks. And then, as mentioned earlier, with the cast when damage taken, linked to Molten Shell, I have the anomalous Molten Shell just to help try to max out some of the buff that you get from Molten Shell, since I don't think I've reached the 50k max to be able to really maximize that damage absorb. But that was a pretty cheap pickup. And then Purifying Flame. This is something I'm still very open on. If you have any comment or any suggestions, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. Just of what could possibly take up this last slot. I was thinking about maybe a Chaos Golem, just to maybe reduce some of the damage taken there. But this is just a way of us getting the consecrated ground. Get some life regen in there. Helps out just a little bit. You could also look into, I think, the anomalous Purifying Flame, which increases the damage taken by enemies by 5%. So with the Crest of Desire and the Lightning Conduit, that goes into our helm and is pretty beefy by itself, which frees up our 6-link. And with our 6-link, I put in Orbistorms with Awakened Chain for the extra +1 compared to the normal chain. Normal chain usually just gives you +2 times. This is +3. Onslaught, which is pretty great, pretty easy to basically guarantee onto bosses. Has a 10% chance onto the unique enemy. Item Rarity. Since that's a hot thing this league, you could put Unbound Elements in here, but you should be reaching the cap anyways, so not too big of a deal. Proliferation, just to help clear a little bit easier, and then Cooling Strike, as always, kind of a nice little thing to round out the benefit from that. And that should do it for the gems. Really pretty simple. The biggest issue is just kind of this one remaining slot. You could also look into, for your Divine Blessing setup, putting Zealotry into here and then swapping your Grace with a Wrath. I was running this for a little bit and it felt pretty good. I think I was able to get up to 23 million DPS, because what you would do is pick up a Watcher's Eye that allows you to create or gain Arcane Surge whenever you create Consecrated Ground, which is pretty easy to have up all the time on a boss. And so with that, you'll get a level 1 Arcane Surge, and yeah, about 23.4 million DPS, which is not too shabby. I will say this is on a good day with Convergence up. Worst case, your Onslaught doesn't proc, you don't have Convergence, your Unnerved hasn't procced for whatever reason, you're looking at 15 million DPS. But Unnerved, pretty easy to get. Onslaught, again, pretty easy to get with the hits. And Convergence once every 4 seconds, so you're looking at between 18 million and 23.4 million DPS. But the issue with that is at least the EHP goes down quite a bit. We'll take out this Watcher's Eye because that was buffing it up quite a bit. So looking at around 60k EHP, and that's great and all, but the 23 million just felt a little bit overkill, to be honest. So that's why I ended up going back to this Wrath setup and the Divine Blessing, swapping off this and taking up Grace, and then putting in the Watcher's Eye that gives you more armor while affected by Determination. This put us up to a cool 92k EHP. Basically, it feels almost like a nice 33% increase, 40% increase to what we had before. really helping to just round it out. I think most of my deaths this week so far are basically to blame on Storm Herald and Mana Siphoner. I think is the ones that the arch nemesis with the ring on it with Doryani's prototype that'll basically melt you down pretty quickly. So something to be mindful from that. I think most of my deaths though are just from me not really paying attention, kind of taking it easy in maps. Once I got to 94, I was pretty happy with where I got, and not really trying too hard to progress from there. But it does feel decently tanky. Otherwise, definitely not something like an RF with Aegis and Melding of the Flesh, but pretty respectable and still doing quite a decent amount of damage aside from that. Just a few more things. A few people were looking into using Algor Mortis on the gloves with the chilling area that you get from Cold Snap. Frankly, I am not really a fan of this. I think the basically guaranteed exposure on a hit from the Eldritch Implicits is just too strong. I'm a little honestly surprised that GGG hasn't made this a % chance. If it was equivalent to the Awaken the Lightning penetration that gives you the % chance, then I would consider changing it and keeping a 6-link with Lightning Conduit. But the exposure on hit with this node over here, that basically gives an extra negative 25% to the effective resistance, just feels really good. You don't have to wait for it to proc onto bosses, which feels great. It's just there right off the bat. So I've been a fan of keeping the rare gloves. Also having the a nerve on there just reduces the need for another awakened gem, which is pretty nice. Also gives you the chance for spell suppression if you do try to go for that, since Algor Mortis obviously does not have any spell suppression on it. Other than that, I think that's it all to really call out. If you have any questions, please feel free to leave it in the comments below. Otherwise, yeah, really can't recommend this build enough, unless you really aren't a fan of 2-button playstyles. It's been a really good week start. Looking forward to trying to take it even further from here, but otherwise I think this is kind of maxed out, and I'm happy with where it's at. So anyways, that's it for today. Have a good rest of your day, and I'll catch you next time.